Welcome back, everyone, to Yang Speaks. Today we've got Ken Jeong, but first, the man of the hour, Andrew Yang, of course. How you doing, bud?
Hey, Zach. The unidentified Zach. He's the unidentified speaking host.
I send the podcast to friends, and then they send it to their parents. And so the parents' feedback was, who the hell is the other guy talking? So I'm Zach. I was Andrew's campaign manager, and my job is to co-host this podcast and mainly get out of the way and let Yang speak.
What more did your friend's parents say?
I thought feedback was great, man. Here's what I'd say. One, numbers were great. We had a ton of downloads. I think we peaked at number 8, whether that's globally or nationwide on Apple Podcasts. And the biggest thing I got, Andrew, was how much people missed your voice of reason. You just talking about how you see the world. There's a big need for a trusted, rational voice in the craziest right now. How's quarantine going, man? How's the family? How are the kids? What's going on?
These are generally good. I mean, I can't complain a bit. I'm in a house. I can walk outside. My kids are generally happy and healthy, getting homeschooled and video online schooling. Evelyn is a rock star and keeps us all taken care of and positive. She's been awesome. If you ever need to be confined in a house with someone, I choose Evelyn Yang.
How does one educate a 4-year-old remotely? Like, how does that go?
With great difficulty. You know, the most fascinating thing I'm seeing is that they have gym essentially online. So it's like this person just kind of drill sergeanting them and like having them do jumping jacks or whatever through the computer. Wow. And I'm happy to say that the 4-year-old is generally into it. And you know, they do things to get the kid engaged. So they play the song, you know, where the kid's jumping up and down to it, or they play Simon Says, or like one of the songs, it's very catchy. It's like, popsicle, popsicle. Why don't you like jump up and down and do this thing? This is how we popsicle. It's like that. Just describe the soundtrack in the Yang household. Evelyn's making sure that they're learning, and I'm taking calls, working on some project or other. We always have something going here at Humanity Forward. About to make another announcement, series of announcements in the next number of days. I guess I can't be cryptic, but whatever. We're always working on something.
No, you've got a lot of updates, and some we'll talk about now. I mean, maybe let's start with some current events, things that are going on since our last pod. First things first, you're suing New York. You're suing the New York Board of Elections. Care to talk about why?
Yeah, they pulled the plug on the presidential primary in the state of New York. And I had a number of people reach out to me that busted their tails in New York getting hundreds of signatures so we could be on the ballot.
Right.
And there's really no reason for it because you're conducting other races and you can have people vote for president in the same way that they're voting in these other local races. So to the extent there's a safety issue, you know, you can do it by mail like many other states have done. Postponing it is not out of the question, but just canceling it outright, it's really doing a number on people's right to express their, their vote. And for the folks who worked on my campaign tirelessly in New York and other parts of the country trying to get me on the ballot, and then to have that right just taken away for really no reason at all. It's anti-democracy. There's no good reason for it. Let's just let the people have their say, particularly because it's not easy to get on the ballot in New York in particular. Imagine being someone who stood outside and gathered signatures on weekends and, you know, like your nights and days off. And then you eventually get someone on and then someone's like, nope, can't vote because, you know, we just don't think it's a good idea, even though there are other races going on that people will be voting in. So it doesn't make much sense. It doesn't have much rationale. And I'm very happy to stick up for people's voting rights.
One of the things that was the hardest part of running for president is physically getting on the ballot. And it's like an absurd number of signatures in a tiny window of time for New York. So yeah, good for you for doing it. It's also a bad precedent, I think. Like just cancel elections.
It's like it's a really bad precedent to be like, you know what, this time no need to vote, because
We're
if you let that go, then then you can end up with some very disastrous situations where people don't think they like what's going to come out in the vote, so they come up with some reason not to have it. I mean, you need to, and I understand the context, and I certainly would not just have people vote from the safety of their own home. Like, I'm not out for people doing anything that poses any kind of risk.
Right.
But other states have had vote by mail for a long time. There should be absolutely no public health risk associated with that. And there's no rationale for canceling it outright. I mean, in many instances, some states have postponed it so they could put in vote by mail.
So I'll say, for those of you listening who had a positive reaction to this, thank you. We didn't think that many people would care. We were literally doing it not from a PR angle because we thought it was the right thing to do. And then when it happened, I had the New York Times and a bunch of people calling me. So that was a fun day. Congrats, Andrew. I'm going to run down some more stuff that happened this week because I think it'd be fun to get your thoughts. The president, since we've launched the podcast, had announced, it said that
shine the light inside. We all know, shine the light inside.
He said we should inject disinfectant into ourselves, causing Lysol and Clorox to say, please don't inject yourselves with our products.
And apparently I saw in Maryland, they got 100 calls about people who were asking about ingesting it. So I have made it a habit not to respond to Trump stuff because I think it's just a waste of time. And he's playing the press. He's playing other politicians, where if you just respond to like the statement of the day, then you're just chasing Trump around and it's a loser. And so I didn't say anything about, drinking Lysol either, because I'm like, oh, does this really like require a response? But then you look up and you see it's like, well, apparently hundreds of people around the country took it seriously. And some people were calling to, get information about drinking Lysol. And it reminds you of the fact that people are really desperate for some form of guidance or leadership, and that even if you say something outright bananas, some people will listen and even act on it. And so, it's disappointing that we have a leader who actually is giving nonsense advice that could literally poison people.
If you're, there's some people in America and a lot of people in America don't trust the media. So like, hey, I'm going to go to the president himself for the source. And if the source is saying things like that, that's when words really matter, Certain states are opening early, and you've got mixed reviews on this. You've got Mayor of New York saying, please stay home. You've got Georgia saying, let's open everything. Where do you fall on this? Obviously, the virus is different in different parts of the country, but it affects us all because of travel and transportation and transmission. So where do you think on opening up and how we scale that up?
Well, one, I think it's disappointing that it's essentially being left to governors and states to figure it out. Like, I think it would be helpful to have federal guidelines and say, look, here's the data you should rely upon. And there is objective data. It's not as robust as you'd like it to be. But Johns Hopkins has an index on cases and the public health threat level in different places. Carnegie Mellon released also like a heat map of how many people are reporting symptoms. So you have at least a couple of data points you can look to, as well as obviously the darkest data points, which are how many people showing up in hospitals, how many people are requiring massive intervention, like where they're on ventilators. So we have some data to work on. And the big missing piece, again, is testing. It's that right now a lot of these states are making decisions based upon really incomplete data because you don't really know how many people have contracted the virus. You don't know how many people might be asymptomatic or might already have resistance. We're really fumbling in the dark in many respects. And that's the thing that pains me the most.
Andrew, our boy, Elon Musk, recently came out on Twitter and said stay-at-home orders are fascist, and he was very against governments ordering people to stay in their home. You're probably, while we love Elon Musk, you're probably not as extreme on that. Where do you land, or do you agree with him on that?
Well, I don't agree, because it's not just you. Like, if I go outside and maybe I'm asymptomatic, maybe I infect several people, like while I'm out and about, And so you could say, well, it's my decision. It's like, well, it's not someone else's decision to get infected by me. So so that there's a real public health issue that affects everybody. The reality is you can be asymptomatic for days. You don't know exactly what impact you might be having. So I do disagree with Elon on this, though obviously admire and respect him on many, many important fronts, because like that guy is, moving our entire world and country forward in some ways.
Yeah. Your big message in terms of the interviews I've been seeing you take has been, this is the time for the federal government to lead and communicate. And that because of the absence of that leadership, you've got states, you've got influential figures, you've got all these different people coming out and trying to pick up the slack. Is that still where you stand?
Yeah, I've been concerned that there's a real leadership void in this country for a long time, and I think you're seeing it. And that isn't just President Trump. It's just that when you look around, Americans don't know who to trust, don't know where to go. Certainly the group of people you hope to trust the most are your government leaders and officials and the Dr. Fauci's and the public health officials. But there's been a real gap in leadership for a long time. And there are a number of reasons for that. I mean, you could go into it. And I think my conversation with Ken touches on some of these things. But
right.
in order to ascend in our society over the last number of years and years, you've had to become a certain kind of animal, certain kind of instrument. And you'd be following very pro-marketplace rules. And then your outlook really changes as a result of that. And then so when someone asks you, you're the CEO of a company, and say, hey, what should we do about this? Like, you see it through the lens of being the CEO of that company. You see it through the lens of being, the doctor, the government official,
right.
The politician. I have to say that, not to say that like everyone's perspective ends up getting distorted, but everyone's perspective does kind of end up getting distorted. So we're looking around, we're not sure who to trust. And certainly, I think President Trump is making this worse by spouting nonsense. But even in the absence of having a president who's actively misinforming us, I think there's been a real need for some kind of public trust and unity that's been eroding for years. You can see it very clearly that our trust in our government leaders has been dropping, and that was before Trump.
Speaking of weird communications or just lack of communication, the government came out this week and said there are UFOs, and they just admitted to it. And apparently we just kind of shrugged. You talk about, I think you're the only presidential candidate in history to proactively talk about UFOs on the trail and talk about Area 51. What did you think when that came out?
I considered saying, it's like, yeah, I knew this. I don't know if you haven't seen the footage. The footage is very convincing. And keep in mind, it's like from the Navy or the Department of Defense. Some F-15 fighter. It's like right out of one of those movies where like there's the F-15 fighter pilot, and then he sees the UFO and is like, what the heck is that? Like, that's pretty much what the video was. And it's official. It's a non-hoax. Right. There aren't that many explanations for it aside from the fact that there's likely some objects out there that we can't account for. And, then you have to look at, it's like, well, what are the realistic explanations for that? Like, does some other country have the technology to have something like that? Maybe. But, another plausible explanation is that maybe it's a UFO.
Why does that get released now? Distraction? Fun?
It is funny what a non-reaction it got, because we're all like, yeah. I mean, it is part of it. Part of it really is that at this point, none of us is that trustful or that trusting in anything. And so you see it and you're like, well, like, who the heck knows? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's part of what I was saying. It's like, who do you trust? And it's like, at this point, this is like a freaking U.S. military video that's been officially released and said, yep, that's real. So this is the most uniformly verified you can get at this point. Right. And yet we're still like shrugging because we're just used to so much misinformation out there.
So this week we've got the one and only Ken Jeong on, and you guys had a really fascinating conversation. And one thing that you didn't dive into much in the convo, but I think was important, is that you talk about him. He was a doctor, even though he loved comedy, and became a successful doctor because that's what the market was pushing him. And then he found his, comedy legs and career later in life. On the trail and before you ran for president, you talked about Venture for America, the fact that the market drives our most talented people to a certain place, and it's not always where their passion lies, even where their talents lie. You mind expanding on that, both what you learned with Venture for America and what you talked about with Ken?
When I was graduating from college, I didn't know what to do, so I went to law school and then became an unhappy corporate lawyer for 5 months. And I got paid a 6-figure salary, and like all the forces were driving me in that direction. And I hated that job, and I left. And then I left to start a business that flopped. And starting a business was a million times harder than school was. And I felt like the market was driving me very, very powerfully in certain directions, where we used to joke at Venture for America that if you were a smart kid in America today, there was an 80% chance you were going to do one of 6 things in 6 places. And so that's banking, consulting, law, tech, medicine, or academia in New York, San Francisco, Chicago, LA, Boston, or DC. Mm-hmm. And you resemble this, Zach. I mean, you're from Connecticut, you went to Duke, and then you wound up on Wall Street.
Yep.
And so Ken resembles that. I mean, Ken grew up in North Carolina and became a doctor in Los Angeles. I resemble it. And it's, on one hand, you're like, well, what's wrong with that? But on the other hand, it's a zero-sum game, that if you send all of your top prospects to do certain things, then, their hometowns are going to end up suffering. You're going to wind up with a lot of people trying to squeeze value out of certain types of activities. Let's call it being a hedge fund manager or something, mm-hmm. where, and then other problems are not going to get solved. So I think Ken's story really resonated with me because it felt very, very familiar. I don't know if it felt familiar to you too, Zach.
It did. Or you have these super talented people, whether they're creatives, they're artists, they're entrepreneurial, they're hustlers, and there they are just slinging mortgage-backed securities or derivatives or some sort of financial term someone made up that no one knows what it means except for Wall Street people. It's dark, man.
Yeah, it's one reason why I really appreciate Ken, because him having to, trying to be like a comedian, or an actor, as a real life doctor. If you think about it, that's actually pretty bizarre. I was joking, it's like, imagine showing up to these auditions and then, being in a doctor's outfit and then not being a costume. It's actually your freaking white coat.
Yeah. And you would say this on the trails, you would, if you go to these elite schools, you had no idea when you got there what management consulting was, but by year 2 or 3, you could differentiate between firms.
Yeah, and that's not accidental. They spend millions of dollars educating the market, and who wins? I guess they win, but who loses? Everybody? I don't know. Everybody who's not that firm, I guess. Yeah. So, I feel like Ken's story is really awesome in that he went against the grain, and in his case, it led him someplace really special.
I will say this quickly, is that I've been talking to some of my friends on Wall Street from my last job, and in this crisis, it pains me to say this, but they're fine. Not like they're fine, oh, they're rich, they're fine. No, their business is still fine. And that's where some of the government reactions to this have been just so misguided and wrong, because the ones that are hurting are the people, and the banks will be just fine.
Well, this crisis breaks my heart on so many levels, but one of the main ones is what you just described, where if you were an entrepreneur going out on a limb the last number of years, you are getting pummeled, you are getting mm-hmm. destroyed. And if you have some, giant banking relationship, you're part of some megacorp, you're fine. Mm-hmm. Just well, I'm at home, sort of sucks, I'm still getting paid, feel sort of bad for other people. Meanwhile, the other people are what the heck am I going to do? You right. Just blasted my business to smithereens. I don't have the sweet banking relationship. My small business couldn't get a loan. You name it. The whole thing, this is a terrible, terrible time, in large part because the people who are least vulnerable are getting hurt the worst, and the people who are in the best positions stay in the best positions.
in your conversation with Ken, which is fascinating, you talk about racism towards Asian Americans right now. And you just launched the All Americans campaign. Any thoughts on how that landed or why you did it?
I'm sure every Asian American in the country has received, at a minimum, dirty looks over the last number of days if you've been outside. And it's gone all the way up to assaults, beatings, getting cursed out. People giving you dirty looks and shying away from you, I think, at this point is routine. And I've experienced it. Republicans have actually come out and said that we're going to blame China for the virus. And in part because framing it as a foreign effort distracts from Trump's mishandling of the crisis and boosts his chances for re-election. But that also has the effect of increasing xenophobia, making the virus seem like a racialized disease as opposed to a natural phenomena. So if there's something I can do about it, I wanted to do something about it. And the All Americans campaign is just saying, look, we're all in this together. This virus knows no race. We should not let this tear us apart. We need to come together and say we're all Americans. We're all the same to this virus. And for the fall, we have to not let Trump distract us from the real issues. We lost 70 days where we could have been tracking patients and tracing contacts and building up the capacity of our healthcare system. And to distract from all that lost time, Trump saying China virus, Republicans are saying, oh, blame the Chinese government. I mean, this isn't like a targeted attack on the U.S. in that it's ripped through the entire world, essentially, at this point. And you have to compare the U.S. response to other countries' response. Like, why were we so far behind? Why are we number one in cases? So those are the questions. And racializing the virus is a distraction. It does throw Asian Americans under the bus. Racism towards Asians is going to be a problem for a long time in this country. And so I thought if there's something I can do to help, I wanted to help.
Andrew, the All Americans campaign got tons of cool people and celebrities to get behind it, from Megan Rapinoe to Dave Chappelle and JJ Redick, and who will be a guest on this podcast soon. What's it like reaching out to all those people? Is that like herding cats? How interested are they?
I know anyone I reached out to was into it because, they're like good people and like, yeah, racism sucks. And like, if I can play a small part in fighting it, they were glad to, except for that one person who will remain nameless.
Nameless.
That one jerk. I know who you are. You know who you are. No, I'm kidding. So like, but I was really impressed and grateful and gratified because, like Joseph Gordon-Levitt and John Leguizamo and Terry Hatcher and Sophia Bush and all these people. It's like, if you're a celebrity, you put your name on something, and there is some risk involved where, it's like the thing that came to mind for me, and I feel bad even referencing it, but it's like the Gal Gadot Imagine video, where I feel like the reaction to that was not uniformly positive. And so I really am grateful to everyone who decided to lend a hand to the All Americans campaign because, like you had to trust. And I hope that we lived up to that trust. It seems like everyone was very pleased with the first video. It got millions of views, even just on my channels. And I'm happy to say we're working on follow-ups with the NBA who want to work on an anti-racism campaign with us. So hopefully it'll be an effort that just keeps on growing.
So coming up, we've got Ken Jeong. He is a Duke grad, so I love him. He's a basketball fan. He's just a genuinely good guy, and coordinating this with him and getting to know him on the campaign trail has been fun. He went from doctor to comedian to an actual very good comedian and celebrity. And Andrew, you got to know him pretty well on the trail, and your conversation, in my opinion, was wide-ranging and fun and fascinating.
Yeah, Ken's a great guy. We met on the trail, and he became a supporter, a member of the Yang Gang. Felt like I had a lot in common. Maybe that's flattering me. But he's a really thoughtful, deep thinking guy. I mean, behind like the comedy and like the TV and the rest of it, I'd say he's almost philosophical. And I really enjoyed sitting down with him. I enjoyed spending any time with Ken. He's just a really fun and awesome guy.
Yeah. And you guys do talk about The Masked Singer, which I will say this, I'm not one to watch those types of shows, but it was on in a hotel in Iowa a few times. And that show's amazing. It's low-key hilarious, and I was like bobbing along. I was into it. I was playing the game. So good for Ken.
Yeah, I think they took that from like another country. I don't know which one.
Did they?
So
we stole it.
Yeah.
That's classic. We stole it. Ken Jeong, Andrew Yang, right after this. All right, folks, this podcast is brought to you by the clothing company Outer Known. So it's founded by pro surfer world champion Kelly Slater, and it's known for high quality, sustainable clothes that are good for society and good for you. And I'm literally wearing mine right now, and I'm being honest with you, I freaking love it. It's pretty freaking comfy.
Outer Known works with factories that pay fair living wages, provide safe working conditions. I also received clothes. I'm not wearing it right now, Zach, because unlike you, I'm not weird.
Yeah.
Where I don't need to wear an artitle of clothing
you
to
presentable
talk about
too.
it.
Mine's like casual. Keep going.
Oh wait, we can be seen right now. Anyway, so but it is really special, distinctive. Like I had on something called a blanket shirt, and it really felt like you were blanketed in a shirt, if you know what I mean. Like the thing's really like heavy. Like I went outside where ordinarily I would need like a hoodie or whatever, and I just like walked out with it. And the fact that it's sustainable does make you feel better about it. It feels like you're wearing nothing at all, to quote The Simpsons. No, that's like a joke.
It doesn't make you feel naked. No, no.
It really doesn't. Anyway, go to outerknown.com today and enter the code YANG at checkout, and you'll get 25% off your full price order. That's outerknown.com, outerknown.com, and use my code YANG at checkout for 25% off. Check them out today, outerknown.com, and don't forget promo code YANG, Y-A-N-G, for 25% off. I'm very happy to welcome to Yang Speaks my friend, the world famous actor, comedian, singer, doctor of medicine, Ken Jeong. Ken, let's give it up.
Woo! Thank you, Andrew. It is an honor to be here. So thank you so much for having me. Really, really. And thank you. Thank you for all you do, brother.
Well, appreciate the heck out of you. And we connected during my campaign. You're someone who blazed a trail that I don't even think anyone, not only was the trail unblazed, I don't think anyone would think that trail even would exist, which is that someone goes from doctor and partner in a healthcare practice
to overactor. Okay, yeah, I agree. I agree. No one's ever really made that transition from the healthcare profession to annoying the public in such a rapid degree.
Yes, they should name that path after you, Ken.
Yeah.
Like any
oh my
other.
God, I was respected, and now I'm not. So yeah, I would love that. It's almost like the opposite of a Yang gang, Maybe. I don't know.
So you went from the most secure, valued profession, maybe in American society, to sticking yourself out there on a limb, trying to break into show business at a time when, again, I don't think anyone had established that like there was a template for someone like you.
Yeah. I had, I was interested. Yeah, I went to Duke undergrad, and I was interested in. I just caught the acting bug like my sophomore year, and it's funny. And I'll even go back to high school. I grew up in North Carolina, and so my senior year in high school, at the end of my senior year, there was like this mock male beauty pageant that was like comedy based, and I had my Napoleon Dynamite moment where I like sang, played piano, did some improv comedy. I forgot what I did, but it got like 2 standing O's, and it was kind of, and I was not a performer. I was not known as I didn't do any drama or didn't do any acting. So I never thought of myself as I thought of myself as, a guy trying to get into Duke. Really, that was my whole definition as a kid. So what's your goal? To get into Duke? And then what are you going to do after that? I don't know. I just need to get into Duke, so that was kind of I was kind of taking it one day at a time. And, but I thought that, I was definitely on a pre-med track. When I got into Duke, I wasn't on scholarship, and we weren't like a wealthy family by any means. So it was, it was kind of mutual, I think, between me and my parents. My dad's a retired economics professor. My mom owned a business and in North Carolina. And
did you have siblings?
I have siblings. She, I have a younger sister. She is a science librarian at Wake Forest University, so in North Carolina. So, so needless to say, I come from a family of academics, and
me too.
Yeah, and that was my path. If I had not gone into med school, my backup plan was maybe get a PhD in biology. So it was not like performing wasn't in the cards for me in any stretch of the imagination. But by the end of my sophomore year, my second semester sophomore year, I took an intro to acting class because, I don't know, I just felt compelled to. I don't even know why. I think everyone was just kind of like, oh, you're funny, or, you just kind of...
So were you funny? Like when you were, in high school, anyone think of Ken as the funny kid?
No, quite frankly, none of my critics think I've ever been funny. So, I don't think I'm waiting for that to happen, really,
Ken Jeong, still
hopefully,
not funny.
Hopefully here, I have my coming out party of being funny. 50 years of charm, as they say. But no, I really thought that I was just, there's a great line from Waiting for Guffman, is a Christopher Guest movie, and where Eugene Levy was a dentist. He played a dentist who was who had a dream of being a stage performer. He goes, I wasn't the class clown as a kid, but I studied him. And so I felt like that was me as a kid. I loved comedy, but I was a stressed out kid just trying to get into a good school. That really was me in a nutshell. I was just trying to do my best in every class I had, and I was really too stressed out to be a class clown. I wasn't relaxed enough, because part of comedy is being relaxed, and I don't think I was relaxed as a kid.
So then you got to Duke, you took this acting class. Did you do any improv comedy or anything like that through your college career?
No, I kind of, we part of theater is doing improv acting exercises, and I just, so I would improvise in certain acting games that we would have, and I just had a natural proclivity towards comedy. And even then, and then I started doing musical theater, and they have a really great musical theater company, Hoof and Horn at Duke, and so I would do that. I would do Hoof and Horn, and then I actually applied to drama school, and I got accepted.
Really?
But yeah, and but that's where I had my crisis of a crossroads, because there was a fork in the road, because I was either going to go pre-med and continue on, because I was taking organic chemistry my sophomore year, and then I could go into drama class, where you have to take you have a drama lab. Your whole life is basically is all drama. All your courses, all your electives, everything's geared. So, and I remember the head of Duke Drama saying, "We think you could do both." And I was like, no, there's no way I could do both. I'm not smart enough. I don't have the bandwidth. I'm not that,
You're like incorrect.
Incorrect. I, even at 18, 19 years old, I was painfully aware of my limitations. And I knew that I did not have the natural aptitude to fully maximize potential in both areas. So it was really hard, man. I made a very difficult choice after discussing with my parents, and of course they were like, go with something.
You mean your parents didn't come down hard for theater?
They were like, son, you instead of waiting for Godot, you should wait on your pre-med. No, they didn't tell me that. So they were like, they were definitely like, but my dad is a very enlightened cat, where we really broke it down, and he was like, do you think you he even said, like, you know, in order to kind of succeed in the show business, you either got to move to New York or LA. Do you think you're ready to do that? Do you think you really could handle all that rejection? Because you will be rejected. And my dad would come to all my plays. I mean, he was a big supporter and still is. I mean, we talk daily. I mean, we're still like best friends because he's been very, like, all the
that's
articles.
Very practical sounding advice. Yeah.
Yeah. And all the articles you see right here, these are like, my dad, early on in my career, he would cut out these articles of his local paper and frame them and send it framed. He wouldn't send me the article so I get framed. He just sends it framed. So I'm here in my office. So my dad, like, to this day, still archives. I'm like, you know what? You could just send it as a JPEG. And he's like, what's a JPEG? So I don't know. He doesn't know these things. So I just let it be. And I was like, you know what? He let me do this. So, you know, good on him. Let him frame away.
Man. I mean, those news clippings. That's yeah, touching.
It's very touching, and it keeps me grounded. And my dad was no, he really helped me make my own decision, which I give him credit for. He said, do you know, just think about your chances. Because he said to me, I don't deny that you're talented. You're exceptionally talented. I just don't know if the rest of the world will accept that, you know. And
yeah, this is literally the 80s too, right? Where,
yeah, it was 88, 89. And he was like, and I was like, yeah, he goes, outside of Pat Morita at that time, there was really no one who looked like me, you know, on the screen. So it was a hard choice. And
Ken Jeong, son of Miyagi.
What? Ken Jeong, son of Miyagi. Oh man, I didn't know you're into movie PR marketing, Andrew. Wow.
Well, I'm just imagining like the showbiz roles for Asian.
My manager will be like, how did this conversation with Andrew go? Oh man, he really wants to spin off a lot of stuff. No, it really was. It was a difficult time for me in college, man, and even in med school, because
med school would be murder, because like at least in college you can still do some stuff on the side, but like med school, there is no way you're doing a whole hell of a lot aside from just grinding and memorizing, because that stuff's brutal for the first.
Stuff's brutal, and that's why I gravitated towards stand-up in med school, because I couldn't do any theater, and so I just kept that up throughout med school and then through my residency. And when I finished my residency, I moved out to LA in the hopes of just trying to continue, you know, like my stand-up and comedy aspirations. And then one thing led to another. I was working part-time at Kaiser Permanente and HMO here in LA. For a while, I was really comfortable if that was kind of my legacy, because I had met my wife Tran at Kaiser, and at that time at Kaiser, I was known as this doctor comedian, and, you know, almost a mini celebrity within my HMO. Like, I had a niche for myself, you know, and I had a full-time practice and a full-time panel, and I liked what I did. And, you know, I'd have a bunch of my friends from Kaiser I still keep in contact to this day, and they would come to my shows, and, you know, kind of like-minded medical professionals who just loved comedy, and we'd all hang out. And my wife was one of them. She was part of that clique of friends that I had. And
no way. You had Kaiser groupies coming to your comedy club.
I wouldn't say Kaiser groupies.
We're just your future wife. That's the greatest thing of all time.
To me, it was more like a Kaiser squad, I think, you know? I think it definitely wasn't a groupie thing. It was more like Taylor Swift and her squad of friends just coming out almost for moral support, you know? And then I was dating my wife at that time. I felt like I had the best of both worlds. That was actually a very comfortable space for me to occupy. She always thought of me as a comedian first. And she was really the only person at that time to really see kind of my true essence. But
that's beautiful.
Yeah. And then by the time I started auditioning for like in my, like after I had a agent who would get me auditions after work, and I could like maybe audition for Will and Grace at that time or some other sitcoms, and I started booking stuff. I just started booking stuff. I booked a part on The Office back in 2005, and then later that led to Knocked Up, and that was kind of my big role, where I played a doctor delivering Katherine Heigl's baby. And I shot that during a vacation week. It was only like a 2 or 3 day role, and then it was that point I knew I kind of had to leave. You know, it was like, okay, this is time where the college kid goes pro, and
How did
Yeah.
your family react, your parents? Because I'm sure your dad remembered that conversation from literally like sophomore year in college, and then like there you are, almost full circle. Like at that point, were they excited and on board, or were there still anxieties?
Oh, my dad. Yeah, when I told my dad, he said he was amazing because he said, "What does Tran think?" And I said, "Well, Tran, she's the one who encouraged me to quit." And he said, "If you have support from your family, then you have my support. Tran is now your family, so you have my support." And that is the most generous, most loving act a parent could give a child, an adult child, and to have that trust. And I'm sure he was nervous, and he disclosed, and he told me he was, but we were always together on it. I never had that feeling of like, you don't get me, Dad, you don't understand, so there was none of that drama. I think that I don't operate well in those situations. So I really think that, my parents also supported me fully, and
Ken, so there are so many parallels between fighting and arts and entrepreneurship, like where there are so many people that have this side hustle or side gig that they are balancing with a full-time job. And you think about that as time, where it's like, okay, maybe I can balance these things. But the truth is that you're never going to have a chance to really succeed at this other pursuit unless you commit yourself to it. And it's not just the time, it's like almost like your spirit or energy, like when you're committed to this path, whether it's starting a business or becoming an actor in your case, or kicking the shit out of someone if you're a UFC fighter, like that it gets really, really hard to balance that with showing up and doing a 9 to 5. And that's something. And when I talk to people because I spent years helping mentor and cultivate entrepreneurs. And one of the things that you encounter all the time is that there are these people that have dreams, and then they have a day job, and the day job sometimes pays them a lot. And then they're trying to balance the two things. And it's a really tough challenge because a lot of the time, whatever it is they're working on, their new business does not have the ability to pay their rent or pay or support a family or, but this new business will never have a chance unless they go after it full force. And at some point, you have to jump if you're going to commit, or you have to not jump and just say, it's like, okay, I'm content with not seeing this business or pursuit really have a chance.
Absolutely. I mean, there was no way I could have done my day job, and then book The Hangover and then get on Community. I only got those big breaks because I went full throttle on it. I only, because the trajectory, even I knew artistically, there's no way it's so competitive and next to impossible to book a role on movies and TV shows. It's so hard, and the odds are so low.
Yeah.
That you have to really devote your whole passion and your energies into it.
Well, there's so many parallels between art and entrepreneurship. It's really the same thing, honestly. And
show
one
business.
of and one of the things that I learned when I was running Venture for America is that artists and entrepreneurs actually have the same impact on a community, where if you have high artist density, then economic development follows. In the same way that if you have high entrepreneurship density, then economic development follows. When I found that out, I was blown away. I was like, because art, instead of thinking of it as like this side thing that's like economically marginal, it's actually like an economic driver. And there are so many parallels to the creative process and entrepreneurship, or starting a business, or running an organization, or presenting a vision and getting people excited and raising money for it and all of that, that there are so many successful entrepreneurs I know who started out as artists.
It's funny, even as a doctor, I found like the really good doctors made their own work their art. I really thought of medicine, if you were fully vested in medicine, if you knew your medicine inside and out, you knew your vocabulary, you knew how to treat, you knew how to manage a patient, the next level is having your own style of management, how to manage patients, how to manage patient care. And each doctor had their own unique style. And the ones that were really good physicians knew that. And so I felt there was that philosophy of making your work your art,
Yeah.
And
like
so
the integrated self.
The integrated self.
You're bringing all of yourself to it,
Yeah.
whether it's treating patients or producing a TV show or starting a business or whatever it is. Like, if you're bringing your whole self to it, then it's not just following a bunch of steps. Like it becomes you.
And it's funny because when you go into the business world, you're looking for outside the box ideas, ways to shift the paradigm, ways to raise some idea next level. And it's not surprising to me that when you think about it, anyone who goes into business who has a career as an artist, they're the ones that can make the biggest strides. It's not about, sometimes it's not about reinventing. It's just kind of refocusing, something. It could be sometimes the adjustments can be minor, and that just makes a big difference. And
and it's really rare because most people you meet compartmentalize to be able to do their jobs. You know what I mean? They like show up and be like, okay, I'm going to do this, and then when they punch out, then they just completely leave it behind. I mean, that's the way a lot of people approach their job. That's one of the things I struggled with when I was an unhappy attorney for 5 whole months, where I was like, man, like, I don't think I'm going to succeed at this, because the last thing I want to think about when I'm not in the office is freaking like whatever, like contracts or like legal work I'm assigned. It's like, I need to find something I care about more deeply. And that's one of the goals, hopefully. It's like, and this is such a terrible time. Like, one of the things that breaks my heart about the coronavirus crisis is I think it's doing a number on the entrepreneurial tendencies of an entire generation. Like, it is like people who are out on a limb taking risks, starting small businesses right now, destroyed. Like, if you're a young person, you're seeing your future become much more insecure. And there's some like bullshit around entrepreneurship that's like, oh, like when things are terrible, like, great entrepreneurs will emerge. It's like, yeah,
yeah, maybe, there's an argument to be made sometime in recession or depressionary times. Yeah, you can have that kind of outburst of ideas, but during a pandemic, no one really knows right now, man. It's just like you said, there is a putting a pin in the entrepreneurial spirit right now. Because people dream of moving to the big city from a small city. But if you're moving to a large city right now where you have that density, where you're at more risk of getting coronavirus, so there's a lot of, if my kids were older and they were in that position of moving or wanting to find that vocational, if they were on that vocational bubble right now, I would tell them, I would just think of it as kind of a suspension of it right now. We hope
it's a suspension. Yeah.
I mean, we need not to pivot right now, but medically speaking, I mean, we talk about serologies and everything, but we need a vaccine. I mean, we need a vaccine. I don't know why, and I know why, because people say vaccines 12 to 18 months away. But I saw something on CNN that was the NIH lead researcher on vaccine research was like, in a perfect world without any major stumbling blocks, you could have a vaccine available by September for healthcare workers, and it could be massively distributed in spring of 2021. I know those are rough,
No, that's the most optimistic thing I've heard in quite some time.
But see, that's where our leadership needs to go and say, hey, the only way for economic recovery is for healthcare recovery. Okay. Yes. And then all roads lead to vaccines, and using serologies as the new driver's license of helping to reopen that economy. So there is, if I were leader, I would be putting as much pressure as I could on the CDC and NIH. Get as many, because there are tons of companies right now that are doing vaccines in the States, and virtually so many countries working on that, and the virus is genetically stable. At least this version of it is. There's slight mutations of that virus, but it's pretty stable. And then studies show even the SARS virus, that's a cousin of COVID-19, people who had antibodies to SARS, those antibodies remained in their body for up to 3 years. So I'm just saying, I'm not saying this is all anecdotal data. I'm not I'm not a physician anymore. I'm just the dumbest judge of the Masked Singer. So what do I know? But I do think that there is a light at the end of the tunnel that's not false hope or raising up, and
that is the real light at the end of the tunnel.
That's the real light,
light.
that I believe. If you want to give people hope right now, it's don't deny science. Talk about when the end all be all of science will happen. And I think that if you could put as much public pressure to super duper fast track that and to make it globally inclusive, to fund that federally, take the middleman out, fund that, federally, and subsidize that, and then you got something where we got a shot at what I believe is a genetically stable virus where you can build a vaccine around that. So the problem with vaccines is like the flu vaccine, the virus mutates every year. So it's hard. So you're basically anticipating what kind of strain of that virus is going to be the following year. But what we need now is just like it's stable right now. So let's work on that. And we anticipate a second wave, irregardless of Georgia, Tennessee, or South Carolina reopening. I mean, most likely we anticipate a second wave. So we're going to arm ourselves with medications, like remdesivir shows high promise in some trials. And then we'll arm ourselves with more testing. Antibody testing is going to be really, really ramped up. And then, let's talk about that vaccine, and if I'm wrong, if there's someone out there listening and who I'm sure knows way more than I do, like, well, you're wrong, Ken, because, vaccines take 5 years to typically, and I get that. And if I am wrong, I stand corrected. And I will happily eat crow on that. If I'm wrong,
you're 100% right that the vaccine is the light at the end of the tunnel. And then the question is, what is that time frame? And then what does that period between now and then look like? So certainly that's tremendous news that we might be able to beat the timelines that I'd heard as like the most optimistic of, like, let's call it 12 to 18 months.
Well, and I understand why those numbers are being thrown around, because as a physician, I don't want to be telling someone, hey, it's the physician's nature to give conservative estimates. There's a like my wife, she's a breast cancer survivor, cancer free now. She had a 23% chance of survival.
Wow.
So we're going to talk about that and say the prospects are very dim, but we'll do the best we can. And our oncologist, who's still our friend, who we still keep in contact, we got it when they painted us this grim outlook. Okay, I get it. And then actually you just stop thinking about the stats, and then you start thinking, let's get those treatments out as fast as possible. So to me, speed is of the essence of what we're obviously not doing a good job of. I don't care who tells me what, we're not doing a good job of getting in front of it. So it's really, yeah, there's a lot of things I see of my former profession that, I get frustrated because, it's been 14 years since I practiced, and and all I do, I don't know a lot of things, but I know, and I've forgotten a lot of things, but I know something like this, you have to act quicker than quick. And, we just gotta step that up,
Yeah, that's like the light at the end of the tunnel. If we can get the vaccine developed, then that's the game changer we need. And even before then, like you said, there are treatments, there are things that we're going to have to bring to bear, because it's not realistic to say, hey, everyone stay in your house for 12 months or whatever it is. It's like we're like, some people that might even be the right thing. Like if you're an at-risk population, maybe you are going to stay in your house for the foreseeable. But there are going to be at least parts of the economy that we're going to have to try and reopen before we have a vaccine. It's like that to me is really like the difficult set of choices you have to make.
Right. And I'm not a politician, so I wouldn't, that's the nuance of, public policy that I have no idea of how to manage or how to regulate. The only thing I can see from, a physician's perspective, 14 years removed, is that, we need to have either some infrastructure of serologies in place to say who is safe to reopen that economy.
Yeah.
We, if there is no vaccine, in place, we need to we need to have that.
Like, do you have antibodies?
Do you have IgG? Do you
yeah.
have antibodies to this where you can safely reopen that economy? Now, there's been some study out that came out the other day in Santa Clara that they even estimate in Santa Clara there might be 85-fold of people who may have been positive for coronavirus for every one person that tested positive in Santa Clara. So anywhere from 50 to 85-fold of that incidence. So that's good news, so that means that there might be a lot of people with that antibody. So I think it would be even better news if we documented that. It would be even better news if we, instead of extrapolated that data, it would be better news if we actually had that knowledge for sure. Because everybody, just like in business, just like even in show business, everyone's worried about the numbers. You don't want the numbers. You don't want the incidence to be so high because it'll look bad for the country. No, you can flip that model around. This is a way to be artistic about it. This is a way to integrate yourself. You can flip that number around. Yes, we have millions who are positive, but look at that death rate. Look at that mortality rate now. It's so low, relatively speaking. So it's like then you really get, from a public health policy, from an economic policy, it's all about that vaccine, baby. You got to get that recovered. You recover the health, you recover the economy. And I don't know why that point needs to be hammered so hard. And there are people who have that opportunity to do that. They have people who have that opportunity to do that, and they're missing the dunk right now on the healthcare recovery. That can satisfy everybody wins. You know what I mean? So everybody wins.
We need more testing, and we need to go full throttle after the vaccine. Those two things are
anyway. More political
correct.
tips from the dumbest judge from The Masked Singer after this, and the unicorn's Tory spelling. That's all I know.
I'm sure you are at worst the second dumbest judge on Masked Singer.
Thank you, Andrew. It's good to have an ally in the room.
All right. The Jordan Harbinger Show is sponsoring our podcast, and they're sponsoring us because we're completely aligned. They have an episode literally talking about the jobs of the future. Jordan Harbinger is kind of a badass, and he brings on these really fascinating people to talk about self-improvement, life improvement.
Yeah, you're talking about an FBI hostage negotiator teaching you how to get people to like and trust you. We all want that. Navy SEALs talking about developing mental toughness and resilience. Who doesn't want to have a little bit more Navy SEAL badassness in their lives? Episode with Neil deGrasse Tyson telling us how the world works. The Jordan Harbinger Show is one of Apple's top podcasts for good reason, because it's the kind of thing that most of us just want to find out more about. And they're so serious about you internalizing each episode that there's like a worksheet to make sure you do it. This podcast comes with homework. Can you believe it? But that means it's good in this case. So check out the jordanharbingershow.com/subscribe. Tell him Yang sent you. Actually, there's no way to do that, but if you were to do that, I mean, it's not like there's any credit taking for this shit. Check out the Jordan Harbinger Show on jordanharbinger.com/subscribe on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. So you genuinely don't know who's under the mask. You're just like,
on The Masked Singer, we know nothing. We like the Nick Cannon, the host, doesn't know anything. It is about a double-blind, randomized, controlled trial of entertainment as it gets. No one know. Like, there are only a handful of people that know at any given time, and it's we have been shocked. So, like, my favorite episode was when you had Lil Wayne on the Super Bowl third season premiere. Jamie Foxx was a guest judge. Jamie Foxx and Robin Thicke, the other judge, they both work with Lil Wayne. They recorded with Lil Wayne, and
so they know him well.
Yeah, and Robin Thicke, who has become a really good friend of mine, he to this day still kicks himself for not. He did 5 songs with Lil Wayne, and he was so upset with himself. And he prides himself. If you watch The Masked Singer, he will close his eyes, and he is quietly. He's quietly, intense about it, where he'll like listen to it and be like, he has this oral gift, where he can recognize a voice. He and Nicole Scherzinger, because they're career musicians, they have gifts that beyond my comprehension. And so for him not to recognize Lil Wayne, that really that really eats at him even to this day. I know Robin very well. Eats at him even to this day.
That's really funny. So you are one of the most prominent Asian Americans certainly in the entertainment industry, like maybe even in any industry. And you and I both know that racism and hostility towards Asian Americans has surged with this virus because there are so many people that unfortunately associate the virus with people who look like us. I mean, China, yes, but most Americans, if they look at someone of Asian descent, they don't exactly distinguish that much between Chinese Americans, Korean Americans, and everyone else. No, it's something that I have to say, it took me a second to figure out just how bad it was. And what really hit me beyond my own experience of just getting dirty looks out in public when I have a mask on and, it's not clear who I am, was the CEO of the crisis text line told me that the proportion of Asian Americans that use the service went from 5%, which is what we are in the population, to 13%, which is 2.5 times what we are in the population. And that's on top of a doubling of traffic generally during the crisis. And it's sort of, like when I heard that, I got this sinking feeling in my chest and my gut. I was like, oh my God, like that is the worst thing, that there's so much pain and fear and anxiety. And then I said, well, it's like, I'll have to do what I can about it.
Yeah,
so
I mean, of course, I have very strong feelings about that. Like, even some of the push against, it's almost like this post-ironic backlash of people calling it the Chinese virus and Bill Maher saying it's not racist. With all due respect, I don't need a white guy telling me it's not racist. It's racist. It's a dog whistle for racism, and it's one thing to evolve and say, and I'm aware that the mainstream media had used the word Wuhan virus and maybe even the word Chinese virus. But once they saw the incidence of racism rise against Asians, Asian Americans, doesn't matter, resident aliens, then they stopped using the word. So it's okay to evolve and then not use the word right now, but then for people in charge to insist on using that word after documented cases against Asian Americans, that's a dog whistle. And that is something I'll never accept. And it's something that is racist, and it's something that has racist undertones, and there's no other way around it. So
yeah, it was in a Trump campaign ad. It's like they're just, so the way that Trump is trying to frame it is as the China virus and a foreign effort, and then that takes attention away from the fact that he so badly botched the response to the virus. Like I genuinely think that an attempt to racialize this virus as the Chinese virus is a key component of his re-election campaign. And that if it's not seen as this foreign effort, then it's going to be harder for him to defend his performance.
I think it's a way to distract from the fact that, that they've been slow to respond. And so, you have some fake outs, you have some dog whistles, and sometimes we take the bait and sometimes we don't. It's like, I'm a big NBA fan. So if you're going to throw like a basketball pass dog whistle this way, and then you want to play defense and say that's wrong, but you don't want to, but you still have to keep track of where that political spotlight is, and not take away from the fact that, look, we all need to do a better job with this. We all need to do a better job, with handling this. And we all have evolved. I'm sure all of us at one point in time underestimated this. It's okay to say that. It's okay to say that. It's not about, because like as a doctor, if some medical, I don't know, if something out of the blue happened that even a doctor couldn't see, do you really want the patient to hear the doctor say, "Ain't my fault, yo"? It's not gonna, like, come on, dude, come on, be in charge. Act like a leader. Take care of your lives. You know what I mean? Like, just be in charge.
Yeah, that's part of it, man. It's like if an ordinary citizen underestimated this virus, that person's not in charge of protecting the country from a pandemic. Like there are people whose job it is to actually be vigilant about this sort of thing, and could have taken actions that would have dramatically reduced the loss of life, reduced the economic harm. Like that. I ran for president, as we all know. Like my dearest wish is that I'd been president while this virus was germinating, because I genuinely think we could have done a whole lot about it. And some people who are dead right now would be alive today. Some of like the people that have had their lives destroyed, like, might be in a better spot today. But, obviously that's just a fantasy. Right now, my attention's on how to get us through this time and then try and rebuild on the way out.
Yeah. I think that's, again, it's about the science. It's about not denying the science. It's about a vaccine. It's about serologies. And what I worry about, what's happening right now in Georgia and Tennessee and South Carolina, you're going to see a couple of weeks when they reopen it, they'll be like, man, no harm, no foul. It's not bad. It's not bad right now. And then I worry about other states following suit. Yeah, you're right. It's not too bad. Then that third and fourth week, because those incubation days are anywhere from 14 to 21 days.
There's like a 3 to 4 week law.
Because those incubation days are 14 to 21 days. Then I worry about a spike in cases. And then what I really worry about is more mortality. And so, but by that time, you'll have seen the dominoes of other states following suit, saying, because in that 2-week window, you're saying, it's not so bad. That's what I worry about. And it's what Fauci says. I want to be accused of overreacting right now. I'm not a vocal guy. I don't vocalize. I'm not like that guy that goes on. I'm not trying to do this to make myself heard. I'm not trying to do this to be famous. I already am famous. I'm a guy who is just worried medically.
Yeah, you're just a concerned
about our
person.
Country. I'm just.
Me too.
That's all it is, because this virus doesn't know no bounds. This virus is not a registered libertarian. It is not like, it has no political suit. It's like, when you're a doctor taking care of patients, I don't. Like, when I was practicing, I don't think, is that a Republican or a Democrat? Because I'll change my algorithm. We just look at them as patients, as humans that we have to treat. And the reason why there's any country that deals with overwhelming mortality is because the hospitals are being overwhelmed. You don't have the resources at any one given time to take care of it. So that's why it's the lesser of the evils to be bored at home, is to hate being at home, and to to watch Tiger King again. That's it's like the lesser of the evils, and it's to be bored, because
Community on Netflix now, I believe.
Community
right?
on Netflix, yeah. You could,
Yeah.
that I love Fauci, because he was like, the problem with the pandemic is if you do everything right and if you flatten that curve, everyone's going to accuse you of overreacting. Everyone's going to accuse. So because if you have Save the World, everyone's going to be like, huh, good, I didn't notice. And then the healthcare professional will be like, you're welcome. You know what I mean? It's just like, that's what you want. You want the world, to say, I didn't notice. You didn't do anything. And then for the healthcare professions, the people on the front line saying, we'll take that as a thank you. You know what I mean? That it's hard to understand, and it's hard to contextualize, but and I get it. And after 31 days, everyone's going to get cabin fever. Who doesn't? Everyone's going to get sick of it. I understand that, and I truly do, and I understand, I'm not way more about this than I do, but these businesses, the small businesses, I understand the collapse of the small. My mom owned a small business. I understand that. So, hopefully that bill that was just passed, to aid
Yeah,
small business.
hopefully.
Well, you would know
Yeah.
more about that than I do. I literally am an idiot when it comes to those things. So I don't know anything. I only know a couple of things: overacting and a little bit of medicine. That's really the only thing I know.
Well, what you put your finger on is we need to trust science. We need to trust facts, and that trust has been unfortunately eroding for years, and we're politicizing decisions that really have very little basis in politics. They have every basis in medicine, public health, infection rates, testing rates, facts. That those things are objective. Like you said, that there is really no ideology associated with the virus.
Exactly, and to get into the nuance with it, according to CNN, they're like, really, it's the IMHE data, that this COVID projection map that I follow every day, what I last heard was it was Montana, it was Vermont, it was Hawaii and West Virginia. Those 4 states could theoretically start relaxing stay-at-home restrictions on May 4th. And then, to me, if everyone was behind that ideology, and then to have people like you, people in Congress, politicians debate how to roll that out, or whether or not maybe people want to stay at home, maybe people want to relax, and to have an educated debate on when to roll out those 4 states, have at it. You know what I mean? I don't know these things, that I don't know, but we all have to operate from a fulcrum of science first, then argue later. You know what I mean? It's just because that's what the beauty of politics is how to divvy up the pie, or when to serve that pie. The beauty of politics is really, to me, is having a pie and how to distribute it, how to either to bake more pies or how to serve pieces of that pie, and how big that piece is. But that, to me, I have no idea what even to do. But
that was the basis of my campaign, which was 1,000 slices of pie to every American every month. We're going to deliver pie everywhere, like apple pie, blueberry pie, pumpkin pie, whatever pie you wanted. I'm with you. Where if we can grow the pie,
I am so hungry right now. I don't even know why. I'm just so hungry.
That's actually who's sponsoring this particular podcast. It's Sarah Lee. No, I'm kidding.
Sarah Lee. Thanks.
I just thought of whatever frozen pie manufacturer I could think of.
Welcome to the Sarah Lee Andrew Yang podcast. Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. And you have then I hold one up, the little logo over there, on the lower third of the screen, little logo.
We'll work on that sponsorship for this episode, guys.
Thank you, Zach.
But
go Duke.
But you're right that these political decisions are unfortunately going to be more and more central to everything, because we're dealing with 22 million unemployed Americans. We're dealing with massive public health crisis that's going to roll on for months. For better or for worse, the decisions that our government officials make are going to be central to how the economy recovers. The decisions that are getting made are going to be life and death for months to come. It's funny, Ken, because people know I'm not a career politician, obviously, and then I ran for president, and now I think I'm something of a hybrid, honestly. But one of the things that I know is true is that government's going to be the center of our decision making for the foreseeable future, and it's going to be the center of our universe for years to come. And that's not something I'm happy to announce.
I mean, I think that we just need a system. I'm only operating only medically, because that's the only thing where I have whether I'm remotely qualified to speak on. It's just, from what I understand, with the swine flu, with H1N1, they let science dictate the policy. And I think then, I just think right now, in this specialized case, you need to have the experts dictate the policy, and then that's where government can be good if we're all acting on the same page, and even if you're different parties agreeing to disagree, there's certain things, like in a time of a crisis, where we can all just agree to disagree, and that's okay. But I think that right now there's a disagree to disagree to disagree that it's just I don't even understand that I disagree with. I don't understand it, and I'm not smart enough to understand that. And so to me, you just want a system in place. But at the end of the day, even despite all this talk, I just want people to get better. That's the end of the day. I just want people to get better. That's all I care about. I just want people, we all know people who are affected with COVID-19, and I just want people to get better. That's really it.
It's a healer in you, Ken. I mean, it's so clear that despite the fact you haven't practiced for years, like, you still have this passion in your voice when you talk about a lot of these issues around health and medicine. It's really human.
Oh, thank you, brother. I think maybe it's just maybe it's because I'm sitting here and I'm watching news round the clock. It's not. I should be watching myself on a Masked Singer monitor critiquing my choices. Then maybe I'll shut up. Go back on a film set, and then distract him from the news. Give him a line of dialogue.
I will. I just want to throw the shout out here. Ken Jeong's Netflix special was tremendous. So if you haven't seen it,
thanks,
you should check
brother.
it out.
Thank you very much. That was a love letter to my wife. It was really about because she's a breast cancer survivor. She is. She's 10 years cancer free, and so 11 years cancer free. So the club where I performed my Netflix special was that club where she first saw me do stand up. What I was telling you,
really, that's so awesome.
That was
that's so personal.
There was a lot of, and the director of it was John Chu, who directed Crazy Rich Asians. So there was a lot of personal moments, of having Tran, and Tran was in the audience, and that was, and I give John Chu, he's really a dear friend of mine. He was like, that was his idea. It was like, I want Tran in the audience, and I want this to be, I want to highlight, because that was the most important thing about that special was the ending, which was really, it's a love letter to my wife with some jokes in between, that's really what it was. And so I credit to John for focusing, getting the camera on Tran, and, looking back, it really is like a nice little time capsule of it was more like a one-man show than a stand-up act. It's kind of like little autobiographical, really. That's
I'm going to say this as your friend, Ken.
Yeah.
I'd obviously seen you perform in movies and TV shows, but I felt like that stand-up special was my favorite thing I'd seen you in.
Wow, I really appreciate that more than man, because it's funny, like, I don't have the same, I don't know, I've always thought of myself as an actor first and a stand-up second, so I always thought stand-up is kind of like, it's like playing defense in basketball. You just have to work really, really hard at it. You have to really want it. People like Chappelle, who is just, he's our generation's Richard Pryor. The words can't express how much I love Chappelle. And, he's a big influence on all of us. So watching, and I actually I had the privilege of watching Chappelle at a benefit a year ago. And just watching him live, it's like watching Mozart, man. He just makes it look, there are people out there, I had to work hard at it, and I still do. Stand-up is something that doesn't come easy to me, but watching Chappelle, who was born to do this, and watching him work, I literally see him write jokes from the stage. I just know it, without even asking. I just know what he's doing, and it's, there's a talent there, and he just knows how to use his instrument. And you talk about integrative self. There's no one in comedy that knows his self, and can integrate it better than Dave Chappelle, for real.
Yeah, I had the same experience in Iowa where he performed for the campaign, and you were just like, holy shit! Like, I feel like I'm watching a master of his craft at the height of his powers.
It's exhilarating to watch. It's like, wow. he just knows exactly who he is. He's got it's a bit of everything. And to circle back, it really is about, you don't know those things until you dive deep and you do this for a while, full time, and you experience the highs and lows that Chappelle himself has experienced. You know, you don't get good until you've hit that roller coaster, you know. And
well, that's the thing about comedy in the live audience, you know, like there is like zero safety net. There's
zero.
No, you know, it's like
oh yeah, I mean, zero. I mean, I've bombed so many times, and if you don't bomb, then you're not. Anyone who says they haven't bombed is a liar. They haven't done it more than 10 times. It's just, of course, you're going to bomb. You're going to bomb by you want to be funny, and then but you have to have your point of view. It's a never ending. I find stand up consistently humbling. When you really get into the art of it, stand up is by far the toughest thing in comedy I've had to do. By far.
Well, the other thing about stand-up too is like, even if you have a joke that works, you have to try something else, like another version of it at least at some point. Like, you know, you constantly have to tweak it just to know. You know what I mean?
Brother, you spoke the truth, man. I've had more than I can imagine, just so many times where, you know, you just got to keep writing, and you have to keep evolving your point of view. And then all of a sudden the world changes and you have to evolve it again, and then you have to start from scratch, you know, and it's, you know, I really worry about the state of, obviously, everyone in the industry worries about the state of live comedy right now. And, you know,
that's like number one on the when the heck are we going to get that back list, because that's a form of entertainment where the audience is so integral that you can't really imagine.
And that's why I keep saying, you know, I hate to be so repetitive, but that all always point to that vaccine. The only way only way we're talking about any of these like frayed ends of the separated ends of rope, that the only way to connect those two rope, you need that vaccine to connect those two frayed ends, man. Because that should just be the end game. You know, for all of us to think, whether it takes 12 months, 18 months. Yeah, those
people working on that vaccine.
That's really what
just
it's about.
So you know, after you get us the vaccine, we're gonna name a holiday after you. It's gonna be like the the Dr. Zach Grauman.
Hey, maybe the people at Betty Crocker will be a part of that. You know, maybe get the Defensive Protection Act and, you know, just really enable the people. But good old Betty Crocker, you know.
So if you want a holiday named after you, get in that lab.
The Betty Crocker
get us that vaccine.
You know,
give us back
with
everything.
Custard. I got a custard back. You know, I get a custard pie with it. You know.
Yeah, your holiday, your vaccine will be sponsored by everybody.
Yeah, you get a shot. Oh, and I got a delicious brownie, you know, right with it. So it's just great.
That scientist coming out for the press conference to announce the vaccine is going to look like a race car driver. He's just going to have like corporate logos all over his white coat. It'll be like this vaccine.
It'll be like the Ricky Bobby. It'll be like the Ricky Bobby of vaccine researchers. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what it's going to be. Mm-hmm.
And then he comes out and I mean, what are the lines from that movie? Freak. It'd be like, he goes out to the podium and he was like,
you ain't first, you're last.
Yeah.
If you're not first, you're last. Yeah. Like that, that's
I mean,
thank you, Zach.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I needed.
He's just gonna. Yeah, that's what. I mean, he literally is just gonna, you know, send out the basically the syringe and go shake and bake right there. So
yes, shake and bake. That's what he's gonna say. That he's gonna shake that fucking vaccine.
Gotta shake it and then bake it. Yep, that's what it's all about.
And then plunge it into himself.
Plunge it into myself. Whoa, I'm immune, guys, and I smell like pie. So I don't know.
Yes. Well, that's a fantastic note to end on.
Just like we scripted it. Just like we rehearsed all of this.
Oh yeah, this thing went exactly.
We rehearsed it, and people don't know. Are they really improvising? No, this is tightly scripted that Zach wrote himself. It's a great script. And
we had a whole list of talking points, and we hit none of them. Maybe one. Nailed it, guys.
Well, that's why I appreciate you coming on our podcast with me and Joel McHale, because we totally We should subtitle me and Joel's podcast as Off the Rails, but we call it the Darkest Timeline Podcast because it's named after a community subplot that community fans really love. So,
yeah, the fans would recognize.
Yeah.
Well, hey man, this was a blast. All the best to Tran
Thanks,
and
brother.
the family,
and you and Evelyn
stay
too, and your
safe.
family too, brother. Yeah.
Yeah, stay safe and healthy, and hopefully we'll have a chance to see each other in person.
Can't wait.
And worst case scenario, if we're trapped for another series of months, then we'll do another great podcast swap of
Let's do it.
2020.
Let's do the Yang cast, man.
I'll
be
join the
back on
Darkest
Yang
Timeline
cast.
again.
Yeah, back on the Darkest Timeline. I'll be on Yang cast. Yeah, that'll be great.
Well, thank you so much, Ken. You're the best. Appreciate the hell out of you, brother.
Thank you, brother. Much love, brother.
Stay safe.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you guys so much. Thank you.
And there you have it. Second episode of Yang Speaks. Tune in next week. Every Monday, we'll have new content, new guests, new interesting takes on the world. And stay tuned as well. We're trying to throw some bonus content out there on days that don't start with MON. So keep you on your toes and keep the conversations interesting. Thank you all. Yang Gang out.